Okay, so let's see, last time around we talked about having this idea of being able to test permissions. So like you can temporarily add something. And you said that you had a new idea now for that?
Right. Do we want to go over that now? I can like discuss
Or
some about that.
or something else. Like I'm not sure. Yeah, like or any other topics that you had
Right.
ready to go.
So something that I was thinking about that was I was writing out like the use cases that we might want to do for being able to test out new permissions. And something that I came across was like the IAM policy simulator, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but it lets you like input like a policy document and then you can kind of see which actions that gives you access to, so that almost like half fulfills the requirement that it lets you see what actions you're allowed to do. But then again, it's not in the format of like a graph, so it doesn't let you make more high level queries on it. You can kind of only see like, oh, access to this action is denied and stuff like that. So I was looking at that one, but also I was thinking more so it would be useful to have this information like overlaid in the graph, maybe as like nodes, like new nodes that we create temporarily and have like a specified like time to live, or maybe you can like delete the node, and that you can handle in Neo4j as well. Like it supports time to lives on nodes, and being able to like temporarily add that data in the graph then allows, because cartography already provides like the functionality of being able to like query different relationships in the graph, right? So that's already there. But then if we wanted to just like add new nodes, we could add those temporarily. But I think I was like hitting confusion on what the input would look like to this.
Can you talk a little bit about what that time to live idea is?
Right. I can actually send a link in the chat if that makes sense. But
Yeah, sure.
let's see if I can pull it up. I have it open somewhere here. Cool. We'll send that. Okay, just sent it. But I think on nodes you can specify like a time to live, but this is with like APOC. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, APOC with Neo4j, and it basically lets you put a timer, I guess, on nodes so they can expire and be removed from the graph at some point of time. So this is like if someone wanted to temporarily test permissions or temporarily add things to the graph, then they would be automatically removed after some amount of time. But also, we would only want to test these permissions locally because they're not permissions that we're syncing to IAM and then pulling down in the cartography sync. So those were like two considerations.
Right. So the idea is that you have something, I guess this is one implementation idea, right? Where
Yeah.
You want to make a permission change, and where you're saying that you want to make a permission change and you want to say how you want to see how it changes the rest of the graph. And
Right.
the way that we would implement that is possibly by using something like a TTL field on a node, and then it'll get deleted eventually.
Yeah.
I guess another thing to consider is that like other consumers of your graph may read that, may not know that you
Right.
have a TTL field on there, right? And then so
Mm.
they'll mistake that as this simulated state is actually the actual state right now. So that's something to
Yeah.
keep in mind. So it could be good for like if you have like a test set on that graph and then you can kind of play with it, like a local thing, like you said. Uh, yeah.
Mm.
It'd be easiest to, I guess this consideration would be good to like kind of put together in a document, and then we can kind of all like hash out these ideas on paper. Yeah.
Right. Cool. I actually have like half the
Cool.
document typed up, so I'll probably share that to the chat today. Yeah. Sounds
Sounds
good.
good.
Cool.
We have a newcomer. It looks like. Hello, Ming.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, I was muted.
Oh, no problem. Welcome. I've seen your PR, and then your the couple of the we've interacted a little bit on open source.
Yeah, I was I'm exploring this project and others.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. So far so good. Yeah, I don't know if you guys already have an agenda. I don't want to disrupt your agenda.
No, Rashini was just telling us about her idea to simulate changes to IAM permissions and seeing it how it affects the graph. And you're just saying that you're going to make a document for that. And I posted a link in the chat about our meeting minutes. If you don't mind signing in, and then kind of like like I said, I don't really have a strict agenda today, so yeah, we're just kind of here to hang out, basically.
Cool. So that discussion was interesting. What was the purpose of doing those what if conditions?
Yeah, I'll let Rashini talk to that a little bit.
Right. So the idea, this was brought up in like the last meeting because I was working on like an intern project related to this, but the idea is that we want something where we can test permissions, right? Because cartography essentially right now lets us analyze like current permissions that exist in AWS IAM. So maybe something that we want to do is be able to prototype permissions before they're actually synced. So being able to provide like a preview of adding those new permissions to maybe not directly adding to the graph. We still have to like figure out how we're going to do that implementation wise, but basically being able to see what effect those permissions have once they're added before they're actually added to and synced to AWS.
Yeah, I think that's a great use case. I was looking at cloud splaining, and I mean, their goal is to look at principles that are over provisioned, right? And that kind of fits into what you're trying to do, which is to say we have these people who are over provisioned, and this is what the graph looks like, and they should look like this instead, right? Perhaps based on. So one of the things that I was looking to do, and I was looking to see how it fits into cartography, is to take the permissions right now. And also, I think with the permissions, it doesn't look like cartography is walking through the assume rows right now, which is probably a big challenge. Is to take the permissions that has been granted to a principal, and then combing through the CloudTrail events to see what permissions were actually exercised for the last 3 months. So then we can do a intersection between what is allowed and what was actually used, and then we can right size the permissioning of that principal.
I guess one idea that you could do there is that if like you take your CloudTrail log, and then for every time a assume roll happens, then you could add an increment counter on the edge to show that this is the number of times that this roll has been assumed. The trick there, though, is that any attribute on a edge in Neo4j can't be indexed. So if you're querying on the edge, it's going to be extremely slow. But you can store it on the edge. Just you can store it. Just you can get it later on. So that could be one way that you do that.
Yeah, I don't.
But do you need to index that?
Sorry, go ahead.
So, do you need to index that?
You don't need to index that. Yeah, it's just that like if you wanted to do a query, like give me all of the people who have assumed this role more than one time. To do the more than one time part, that part will be choking the query because the edge can't be indexed.
But I guess main your scenario is, and I think that I've seen similar, is you basically have persistent and broad access, but you don't know what you can trim down, right?
Yep.
And what you want to do is like what is actually truly being used, and it doesn't really matter how many times, or does it? or does the only thing matter is that that's actually been utilized within the last, like, whatever, 30, 60 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's enough for now. Is what it's been using on.
Yeah. So maybe just has attribute. I don't know what the performance is on a has attribute on an edge, but that could be potentially kind of a shortcut there, right? So anyway, we're talking about like details of optimization there, but that's what I like to what I hear here is and something that I think would benefit a lot of people is the beginning of CloudTrail streaming into cartography, like just getting the skeleton in place there. There's a broad set of scenarios that can be used for that.
Yeah, so that's a little bit related to what I attempted to start the discussion on the chat, and Alex sort of chime in on that. The current cartography is designed in sort of like a scanning and loading all in one thing. So if you run it, it'll do an API call, take the results, and then push it into Neo4j. That's going to break down with the CloudTrail streaming, because that really doesn't work on a scanning basis. It's a push model, and so the idea would be good is if we turn the entire thing into a push model, and then the scanning just happens to be a periodic push, and that would allow us to take any JSON file that contains the result and push it in, whether it is a result of an API call or whether it is coming from CloudTrail. So basically to detach the API call and the loading of the data in the current scheme of things. It may be a very invasive change in the system. It sounds like, but by breaking that dependency, it allows us to do a whole bunch of interesting things where we're doing what if analysis, we're doing programmatic changes without being tied to the actual hitting of the cloud API.
I like the idea. I don't know if you've heard of previous discussion about other things that could involve a push model, things that, because we've talked with other teams before that have been using us, wanting more real-time updates. So like incorporating an idea like yours, I think that could help with enabling, more. You take like events, right? And then so you want to know like when something changes, and so you can update the graph whenever you want. You're not just locked into this twice a day cadence or whatever heavyweight sync that you have set up for yourself.
Definitely, yep.
I'm open to the idea but like you said, it's a pretty invasive change. It's a very involved change. It's a re-architecture of the entire thing.
Yeah.
If you want to drive this change, if you're interested, we can work together on a tech spec and then see like how those pieces would line up. I think that faster updates would benefit everybody. I think that, not having everything coupled to one heavyweight sync job, eventually that can be beneficial.
Yeah.
As far as like timeline and stuff like that, I don't know how long that's going to take though.
So
yeah,
there's the sort of there's a re-architecture way, right? Which is quite expensive, disruptive. There's also like just get it done way, or as an ex-lifter is like make it happen, right? Is like you could potentially, just quick thinking here, could potentially introduce a new concept of Intel module, which is stream modules. Right, which is you can do this in parallel, kind of, and it doesn't need to be connected to the sync job. Right? Now, I do recommend to run your sync job first so that you get the metadata. But technically, if I could be completely wrong here, but my quick thinking is actually a mature CloudTrail stream module may actually be a pretty good module that would not require you to run the whole sync job after initial creation. If we're thinking just AWS, right? So I think there's overemphasis on AWS and cartography. I'd like to get diversification there more, but like if we're looking at just AWS, is there a need to do sync?
I don't think so.
Once a cloud stream is actually enabled.
Yeah,
so you
because
can potentially do this in parallel.
Yeah.
I'm thinking through also like, why don't we just do AWS config, right? That's the route that Netflix went with their own system. And one of the reasons they just didn't generally use cartography. I think cartography is still being used at Netflix, but in their core system, they went with the AWS config route, which was a lot more scalable. So
Yeah.
there's a hacky way of doing it. I don't think it's that much of a hacky way. You're just introducing a new stream intel module without having to re-architect everything.
How would it play together with the main sync, though?
It doesn't matter, does it? Like you're
Well-
running the main sync, which is basically loading the bulk data, and then if you write your, again, devil's in the detail, but like let's assume, right? I'm not making a mistake here. You're writing your CloudTrail stream, and you're using merge correctly, right? I mean, you may end up duplication. I personally, my quick thinking is once you actually do the sync first, you turn off the sync and just use CloudTrail. Once CloudTrail has all the bells and like your streaming has all the bells and whistle, right? So it doesn't really impact you that much.
Right.
And
so you do like one main sync, and then the CloudTrail will be kind of like a daemon that lives on, and then just like takes those streaming events and stream it right in.
And the reason why you don't just run the CloudTrail is you only get visibility of what's being used.
Right. You don't get visibility on the creation events.
Yeah. So I don't know how far CloudTrail extend. Like you can't ask like, give me all the logs from day of creation.
I think you can though, right?
It depends. So if you can tell AWS to put CloudTrail into your own personal bucket, and then so you can control the retention of that bucket.
Yeah, but can you go? So Alex, imagine Lyft environment like a couple of years ago, and the fast sort of change, the fast change management. That's a pretty significant amount of logs.
It's a lot.
Right. So I'm dealing on my end with like 11,000 AWS account where like massive infrastructure. So maybe, I don't know, maybe AWS supports that, but it's probably going to be faster for you to do the regular sync.
So the size of the data is the real reason why I'm looking at the push model. So I'm looking at Neo4j as a sort of stateless, ephemeral system. So the idea is that I have billions and billions of events in my data lake. I want to be able to choose a portion of that data and push it into into Neo4j, execute my queries to fetch a result, and then I'll destroy it. So it's not meant to be a temporary model because Neo4j cannot handle that volume of data. So that's the real reason why I'm looking to do a push model.
So your Neo4j, I guess cartography would have only the latest, but you don't have history. Is that and Neo4j?
Well, I have my history in my data lake, right? So imagine that I have a data lake that contains months and months of CloudTrail events. I also have either config snapshots or the API response snapshots, and I store all of that in S3. And if I want to dynamically pick a subset of those data and push it into Neo4j or cartography, run the report, run the queries, and then when I'm done, I'll just shut everything down and destroy it.
And the scenario is like, I want to know what the world looked like at a point in time.
Well, so yeah, I mean, imagine sort of like a SaaS tool where if I am running a report for a customer, I want to use the cartography and Neo4j to take advantage of its capability. But at the end, it spits out a report that fits nicely in a relational database or in PDF or what have you. I don't actually need the Neo4j line hanging around anymore because it's not a real time. It's strictly a reporting system. So I'm just using the brain to generate the report, but when it's done, I can dispose of it. And I would do that for the latest data, but then there might be some cases where a customer might want to say, oh, I want to run a one-off report to say, can you compare the data for today versus what happened last month? And I want to do a diff to see what has changed between the two timeframes. And that was another thing that I wanted to bring up is the way that we're doing drift detection. I was thinking we can use the Neo4j diffing, the APOC diffing function to do it instead of doing it the way we do it today. So that's another use case is to ultimately do a diff as well.
Yeah, I think that Sasha, correct me if I'm wrong, but the main, I guess, motivation behind the drift detection design that we have right now is we didn't want the graph to get overly bloated with like millions and millions of nodes from each day, so that anything that becomes stale, we delete the stale ones, and then anything that's a diff that we care about on drift detection, those are the things that we log.
We wanted to have a quick alert. Let me give you that, like the sort of the straight answer on this one. For velocity, keeping historical data was just not a focus. Right, the level of complexity there in the scenarios, they just didn't get aligned with sort of a minimal viable product. So that's why, from an engineering perspective, it's like if we eliminate that scenario, right, we can move super fast. Now, as the maturity comes in, and more people have scenarios, and I think having historical data and snapshot is super useful. Alex, you may recall in a previous job with the two of us is. Here was the state of an infrastructure before Red Team came in, and here's the state of the infrastructure 6 months later. We showed those two pictures and dropped the mic, right? So that, like, you want to see what we did in the last 6 months, right? Let's get promoted, and here's what we did. So that was like super powerful, and I think that's what Ming seems to be looking at, is being able to kind of generate those reports. It's just like, from an engineering perspective, I've elected to skip that step because it wasn't getting to the point. But maybe now this is the time to think through about it.
Well, yeah, and that in general, we know that Neo4j is not exactly a big data platform, right? And there needs to be a solution around it. It's either, I don't think, maybe with 4.0 and the Enterprise Edition, with this fabric, maybe it'll make a difference. Originally, when I look at cartography, I was attempting to migrate it to Janet's graph so that it can at least sit on top of Cassandra for me to scale. But now I'm thinking of a different model, which is not to get Neo4j to scale, but to get a way to dynamically load it, do what I want to do out of it, and then tear it down so that it doesn't have to scale. And that's how I arrived to this point right now.
What kind of scale are we talking here? Like how many millions?
Neo4j. I mean, Neo4j it's kind of like the Mongo of databases. It can't really scale. So
I just got this is being recorded. So there is a way to scale Neo4j, but it's becoming more and more expensive. So I'm just negotiating a new enterprise deal. I did not pay this the last time. Whoa, but. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a way to somewhat scale it, but it's the same with all database, right? So it's a vertical scaling problem. You can add cluster, but it's still a vertical scale problem.
Right. And I think the route that I'm trying to take is not to get it to scale from a size perspective, but to be able to just operate it at a large scale, right? If we have the data lake in a cheap object storage like S3 and maybe even in Glacier for like really old data, and if we have a very efficient and automated way of hydrating Neo4j at will, in a timely and controlled manner so that we can get what we want out of it, and then make it ephemeral, then we don't have to get it to scale, assuming that we're not using Neo4j for like real-time alerts and stuff, right? So that's the idea.
What you're describing sounds very familiar to Sasha. If you remember what Ben was talking about, like maybe a couple of years back, where you're correct me if I'm wrong, Ming, but what you're saying is that like you want to use Neo4j strictly as kind of the analysis layer, right? Where you can do all your complex, beautiful Cypher queries, but the data ingestion part, that's left to something else. You want to get that out of your data lake. That's a massive re-architecture. It has been worked on in the past. It's unfortunately not in open source, but I like the idea. I don't know how much effort that's going to be, though.
Well, so I look at the automation, the test automation. It looks like there is a way to feed data in the test script. So I'm thinking about just hacking whatever is being done in those test scripts and converting that into into what I need.
Right. You're talking about our integration test, right?
Yeah.
So Alex, can you give a bit detail on your mention about a re-architecture, right? Because like I'm not entirely clear on like does it need a full re-architecture to achieve that? It needs some new modules. Don't get me wrong, but like architecture-wise, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it sounds like as far as what our architecture is right now is that we are pretty tightly coupled in the sense that there's a phase where you get stuff from an API and then you load it to the graph, right? And then so we would need to split those two things. Every single module kind of assumes that right after I retrieve my objects, I'm going to immediately put it right into the graph. I'm not going to put it in an intermediary. I'm not going to put it into a temporary spot. What Ming is describing, to perform that analysis and have spin up a temporary Neo4j for only the objects you care about, you would need that temporary spot.
Yeah, so it's a re-architecture of the modules themselves, right? You can still write a module that pulls from S3. I think we've done this in Azure. I'm doing this at Amazon. We've done it with Cosmos. So the concept works. It's just like, where are you getting your source of data? Is it S3, or you're combining, basically pulling the data and pushing in Neo4j? So it's a rewrite of the hypothetically.
Yeah.
If we're thinking it's a rewrite of the Intel module,
right.
not necessarily the mechanics, right?
Right. Yeah. Maybe re-architecture is too strong of a word. It's definitely a rewrite. Yeah.
Because I can see like alignment. So I don't know what the progress is there, but you were mentioning about kind of implementing DAG for data pull, right? So if the work is being done there, that's, in my view, some level of re-architecturing versus more kind of, okay, we need to rewrite this to do different scenarios, but it blends in nicely with the current flow, right? Which is what I think Ming is referring to. If you pull from S3, let's say you give a parameter and says, okay, go sync from S3 on this date, right? And it just it asks S3, okay, give me the data for these dates. The DAG piece is probably more of a re-architecture. It might be a good place to do it there, or at least open the door to be able to do that, as well as potentially streaming. Streaming, in my head, the hacky way in my head is, I wrote something completely separate outside of cartography, or as an Intel module in cartography, that is not called by the sync script, and I just do a cron job on it. Just sorry, not cron job or watchdog, right? Make sure it's always running, and if it doesn't run, just keep running it. But the snapshotting is any updates on the DAG?
No updates. I've been absolutely swamped with other stuff.
Maybe I need to ping Nico now. You guys have other. I've been talking with Nico. You guys have other priorities. Yeah. I'm glad I joined the meeting because sometimes I can't make it because I'm having internal conversation here with quite a bit of devs involved. Now, are those changes going to make it back to, are we building custom stuff here, or can we contribute back? There's still some fuzzy, there's some conversation that needs to be had, but we might be able to move this faster. I just don't know how fast we can move it back to the open source here.
Cool. Yeah, Ming, if you don't mind cutting together a quick, maybe one-page document or whatever, we can kind of collaborate on our ideas there. This has been a good conversation, I think.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm happy to meet you guys. I'm glad you thought it's not a crazy idea.
No.
It is very likely that I will probably just build it, and then I'll let you. I'll ping you when I have the code. This is part of my bigger project, and so my stack sits on top of Kafka. So I will be using the Kafka sync to feed into Neo4j. And I also have Kafka sources that is pulling from AWS, and then the data selection and enrichment and massaging will happen with KSQL in the middle, and then it feeds into Neo4j, amongst other things as well. So yeah, I hope to get you at least a proof of concept based on the code and based on this discussion. It looks like it's definitely doable, so that's just good.
Yeah, sounds like we would benefit from your work also. This sounds awesome.
So are you prioritizing, I heard two scenarios in the conversation. One is the historical snapshot and push model, and the other one was CloudTrail. Are you working on both?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I think we started talking before you joined. One of the use case is the right sizing of the permissioning, or detecting over permissioning, and so the idea is to load the permissions for all the principals, walk through all the assume role capabilities, so that we get a universe of all the permissions that a principal have. And then I want to look at CloudTrail for the last 3 months or configurable number of months, and see what kind of permissions were actually exercised. And then I want to compare the two so that I can go back and say this particular principal is over provisioned because it looks like this person doesn't even use all the permissions that's been given to them. Chances are that's usually like the CIO,
Well, I'm very familiar with that scenario. I'm assuming you're on the Slack.
Yep.
Okay, I'll reach out to you. I might be able to give you some horsepower to get that solved because I'm looking at the same problem as well.
Oh wow.
So that's why I understand at least the scenario of this is a burn down scenario, right? So you have a bunch of permission, nobody knows why, and they've accumulated. Is that employee? We're also mapping HR data. Lyft has that. It's just not a module that's out, and like. Why is someone in another org has permission? Did they move? Right, things like that. So looking at actually what is being used versus what is being granted is a very common problem.
Yep.
And I'm dealing across like I work for a 1 million employee company, so you can imagine like we something like that.
Yeah, let's hope. I hope that we can collaborate on this. It
Okay.
looks like we're after the same things, and looks like we share some common approaches. And I'd love to get this working in using cartography.
Sure, I'll ping you through Slack.
Okay, great.
So good.
Sorry, guys, I need to jump to another call, but this
Okay.
has been great. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for joining.
All right, thanks.
Talk to you later. I think that we actually ended up interrupting Roshni's idea, or did you?
Okay. No, that's fine. I was just gonna like type up a doc and then send it to you guys on the
Okay.
Slack channel later.
Was
So
there
it's
anything
fine.
else that you wanted input on for your idea, or?
I think most of what I was a little bit confused over, what I was thinking about was kind of like the input, because I know that kind of what we want to take in is maybe in the format of like a policy document or something like that. But how we're currently handling it in cartography is that you guys are using Bodo 3, right, to pull down the data from IM. But then if we wanted to have something where we're getting a test policy document or something like that from a user, then we likely wouldn't want to write code to like have to parse that and stuff like that, right? Or
well, I guess kind of like what Ming was talking about earlier with like the integration tests. Like we have that whole harness where it'll actually load in the like sample dummy documents from Bodo 3, and then so what you could do is give it a like an IAM document that Bodo 3 will return to you, and then feed it through both the IAM sync and also feed it through the permission relationship sync. So then that way, once it's done both of those steps, you'll have the IAM nodes in the graph, and then you'll have the analysis that the permission relationship sync has performed on it. So you'll have like this person can assume role and all of those other identity to resource relationships. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of like the way that I would think of it, because yeah, that's one way to test, I think.
Cool. And that's in the integration test, right? I can go take a look at that later.
Yeah, copy the integration test on the IAM sync and the permission relationship sync.
Okay, sounds good. This is also a little bit random, but I was trying to clone like the cartography repository, which I had cloned previously, but I'm on Windows now, and there seems to be a file name with like a colon in it, and you can't do that on Windows. And
yeah,
I don't know if
Sasha
there's,
actually
like,
fixed that a couple PRs ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
what did I fix?
You
I
fixed
have more problems now. I moved to management, so I always give a heads up like, hey, every time I check in code, the reality is I'm checking code between meetings. So if I fix something, I'm happy.
Well, yeah, Sasha was like the first cartography user that uses Windows, so you fixed that colon error in the drift detection test file. So
Okay.
I just try to get it up and running. It's like this sucks. I actually went back to Macs. That's a different topic.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm happy it works for Windows now.
Yeah, so the latest master should be good with that.
Okay, I'll do that, because I think I was trying to clone like my fork of it from the summer, so I'll just make a new.
Yeah, it was a nasty bug because you couldn't think. You can get a full list, right? So Git would crash. Like what the hell is this?
You can blame Thomas for that. Oh, by the way, Sasha, off topic, but Thomas started at Lyft.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and he can watch this recording later on, and then watch all of us making fun of him. And why is he not here, even though I invited him? Anyway.
Why is drift detection not working as expected? I wrote it once, it got rewritten, and there's some good gems in it though in the new version. It just I think we forgot the scenarios we're aiming at. We went too broad. Scenario first, fancy code after. Yeah,
I'll let you guys hash that one out.
I'm fine. I'm not mad about it. It was an intern project that I think was pretty successful.
Yeah, we're still running it. Yeah, it works for the few things that we need it for right now.
Yeah. Quick alerts. Something deviates. I want alerts. If you get that beacon, then the scenario has been successful.
Yeah. Cool. We've got about 12 minutes left. Does anyone else have any other topics? If not, I can there's like maybe I wanted to go give a quick shout out real fast to let's see. There's been a fix that I've been pretty happy about. This I'll take like 2 minutes. So I don't know if you guys saw the most recent couple of PRs, but I don't even know if this is going to work. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so Chrissec has been helping us a lot on EC2 related stuff, EC2 networking related stuff. So this is a pretty interesting one where I didn't know about this, Sasha, but apparently we had a typo for a long while where we weren't ingesting security group egress permissions, and it was because the field name is permissions, not permission. And he caught the bug, fixed it, and then added test cases. So yeah, thank you very much for this fix.
And yeah, we were primarily looking at ingress, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's why we didn't catch this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is egress.
I probably wrote that code, so yeah, shame on me for not testing it right.
It's okay. We're all it's moving forward. And then so this other one that he added too was on EC2 subnet nodes. So we pull in subnet nodes from like other data. So like you ingest the EC2 instance and then you get the subnet because it's attached to the instance. This code actually queries the subnet directly. So it'll sync the subnet directly. So you get extra fields associated with it, such as the availability zone and all these other helpful things. So yeah, special mention there. Thank you for your help.
Yeah, that's people are using it and digging into it. Now on the first one, I'm actually surprised we didn't catch this with unit test.
Well, because there were none.
Oh, well, as I mentioned, minimum viable product does not include unit test, right? Get the value proposition now, and then cut the corners, and then you pay for it later. But when you pay for it, you actually get funding.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah.
We're getting there. Anyway, that's all.
It's an ongoing debate between Alex and I for years, so that's fine.
I mean, the right answer is always somewhere in the middle. So.
Did we push the needle? Yes, then I think that was successful.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, that's all I have. Does anyone else have anything else? Cool. Right. Yeah, this was good. I'll go ahead and give everybody back 9 minutes. Thanks for coming.
Cool. Thanks. I'll have a doc out on the Slack later today.
Sounds good.
Hopefully we can collaborate on that.